In this video, we will discuss the concepts of inequalities and inequities and their relationship to public health. One visual way of exploring the differences between equality and equity is shown below. You may have seen this visual, or another example which is similar, as they're often shared widely online. The source of this visual may be somewhat surprising. It was developed in 2019 for a design and tech report to discuss how digital technology could be made more equitable. That being said, it is still an effective way to understand the concepts of equality and equity. Let's have a look at them in more detail. Let's start with the first example. This shows inequality, where there is unequal access to opportunities. In the image, we can see an apple tree which is slightly tilted to the left, favoring the person underneath it who is able to receive the apples as they fall from the tree. The character on the right, purely due to structural issues in terms of the way the tree is placed, and their own position, is left without any access to the apples. It's important to note that while this tree appears to be tilting naturally, our social structures are not naturally inequitable. They have often been intentionally structured, designed, engineered to benefit certain demographic groups over others. Here we have an example of equality. This is when everyone gets the same opportunity. In this example, even distribution to tools and assistance. Both have access to a ladder, but as you can see, due to the tree tilting to the left, the person on the right is still unable to access the tree and the fruit. Here we have an example of what equity looks like. There are custom tools which allows everyone the opportunity to be on a level playing field with their peers, and it acknowledges that there is an unusual level of fairness to compete in the first place. As you can see, the person on the right now has access to a taller ladder, which enables them to access the tree in the same way as the person on the left. While equity is an accessible solution for mitigating the effect of an unfair society, striving for justice involves the more challenging work of correcting our social structures and systems in a way which ensures equitable access for future generations. In this example, you can see some props have been applied to the tree, so it is no longer favouring one side over the other, and everyone is able to access the fruit using the same tools. Equity is a solution for addressing imbalanced social systems. Justice, however, can take equity one step further by fixing the systems in a way that leads to long-term, sustainable and equitable access for generations to come. As you become more familiar with the literature in this area, you will discover that these terms are often used interchangeably and may vary depending on the context. Let's look at the terms health inequalities versus health inequities. As we saw in the example with the tree, inequality refers to not having access to the same resources, whereas inequity refers to a level of unfairness. In practice, these terms are often used interchangeably and synonymously, and health and social inequalities carry the same meaning of differences in health which are unfair. In fact, several languages only have one word for the two terms, and no distinction is made between them when translated. Now let's look at the terms equality and equity, which sound similar. However, implementation of one over the other can lead to very different outcomes for certain groups. Here is a very simple example. Imagine that a local healthcare organisation is facing budget cuts and needs to reduce their budget by 25%. They decide that the best way forward is to reduce the opening hours of healthcare centres. An equality approach would be to cut all of the healthcare centres in the area by the same number of hours at the same times. However, this solution may not be equitable. The reduction of the hours will have less of an impact on those who use the healthcare centre less because they are relatively healthy, and it will impact those who already have poor health and need more frequent access to the services. A more equitable solution would be to review which centres are used most frequently and to use this information to reduce the hours where there is already less demand. So let's think about equity in the context of public health. This is the definition of equity by the World Health Organization. This definition has three distinct parts. First, it says that equity is the absence of unfair, avoidable, or remediable differences among groups of people, whether those groups are defined socially, economically, demographically, or geographically, or by other dimensions of inequality, for example, sex, gender, ethnicity, disability, or sexual orientation. Second, it says that health is a fundamental human right, and this is true. Article 27 of the Human Rights Act states that everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care, and necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, or other lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond his control. Finally, they say, health equity is achieved when everyone can attain their full potential for health and well-being. There are three key features of health inequalities, which are outlined by Whitehead and Dahlgren in their 2006 report for the World Health Organization on tackling social inequalities in Europe. The first feature mentioned is that there is a systematic pattern of the differences in health, and that the differences observed are not random, but show consistent patterns across populations. A striking example of this is the differences in health by socioeconomic group, where you can see clear patterns of ill health and lower life expectancy with declining socioeconomic position. The second feature is that it's social processes that produce these health differences rather than through biological determinants. For example, the ill health of children from poorer families is not determined biologically, but rather through social processes. The third feature is that social inequities are differences widely considered to be unfair and maintained by social structures and processes which are unfair in principle. These three key features can be useful in determining differences between variations in health and health inequities. For example, athletes are prone to very high rates of injuries. Although these differences are systematic, they would not be considered to be unfair or unjust, and therefore not a health inequity. In the next lesson, we will be learning about the social determinants of health and what actions can be taken to address them. But before getting into the details, let's take a step back and consider why understanding and addressing these health inequities is important. First here is a moral case for addressing social inequities. As we just discussed, health is a fundamental human right. Inequities are inherently unjust and unfair, and so there is a moral imperative to correct them. There is also a social case to be made that good population health is important for society as a whole. For example, if you consider a single individual who is in good health and is able to contribute to their community, for example, by providing practical or emotional support to friends and families, or by participating in community social groups and activities, this can have a beneficial impact on social cohesion. Finally, there is a strong economic case to be made that healthy populations are important for a thriving economy. Healthy populations are able to work more and therefore contribute towards economic productivity. And the healthier they are, the longer they'll be able to work for.